Afternoon, everyone. Hope you're good. Welcome back to Chewing It Over. We're live weekdays at 12:30, and we also then are available after the fact wherever it's gone on social media, be that YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. So if you're encountering it one place and you'd rather it somewhere else, it's probably there as well. We also then put the audio onto a podcast stream, so you can access it on your podcast apps, whichever you use: Stitcher, iTunes, Spotify, etc. Many thanks to the people that feedback after the fact. Probably about 70% of listeners listen in their commutes afterwards, etc. But because of the conversational nature of the show that we're doing, they then want to feedback and stuff afterwards, which is great. And we try and feed that in, and we definitely integrate those topics that you want us to cover into future shows. And then people tune in at lunchtime if they can do. Today, I want it to be certainly lots of participation. Whenever I have a guest on, which I do again today, it certainly means that you guys are a little quieter on the chat function, which is fine. But definitely on this one, I know the lady I'm about to introduce is someone that really wants to hear your views as well as I do. And so we're going to have a chat about why Becky and her colleagues feel that this is a time to be talking about massage and manual therapy, but in a different context than the circular arguments that have been happening over the years. And I suppose it's also given insight as to why we're joining that fray in a more obvious and vocal fashion, and partly inspired by her and her colleagues. So may I introduce to you, in a few clicks, Becky DeMott Horton is here. Becky, can you hear me?
I can. Yeah.
Fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm all right, I think. It's been a mental few days, as it has been for everybody, but I think I've pretty much just figured out what way's up, and I'm still here, so it's all good.
Yeah, well, I think we'll probably come to talk a little bit about that, no doubt, without getting into the nitty-gritty of it too quickly. Tell the audience that might not know about you, who you are, and what you're doing talking to me now.
Okay, cool. So I'm a soft tissue therapist. I trained about 2.5, 3 years ago, so I'm relatively new to the industry. I trained with Anna Maria Mazzieri it's up for me because I'm in Cornwall, but it is only in Exmouth, so for the rest of the country it's down in Exmouth. I did the ISRM level 5 qualification. I've been working down here. I've got my own clinic down here, which is actually in a bit of a state of flux at the moment. But then I've sort of stayed in touch with Anna and got in touch with Matt and kind of fell in with the stuff that they were doing. And then really the first lockdown was a good kick for us to go, right, this is really our opportunity to get out there and do something with this. And the three of us feel very passionately about massage and manual therapy and its place within the industry, but also that, like you say, we need to change how we're talking about it, and we need to maybe reframe it slightly so that our voices get heard.
So let's talk about why the time is now, because I think that's a good touch-off point for us to sort of talk about it. And I know we've had many a conversation off air, as well as you guys then just being, to be honest, I've been a bit upset because you've hardly needed me and team, really. You guys have just flown with it. But I thought we'd be more involved, and you've been tutorless in many ways. But tell folk and probably tell me and remind me a bit about why the time is now, because you guys are being pretty vocal and provocative in all the right ways, but there seems to be a sense of urgency to some of the things you say.
Yeah, I think COVID has been an opportunity for us in a way. Actually, it's brought the industry together in a way it's never been brought together before. The fact that the manual therapy and massage, everything kind of other than physios, osteo, and chiros is unregulated, so it's very fragmented, and that's never really shown up as an issue before until COVID. And then all of a sudden, the fact that we had no cohesion as an industry was a hindrance to us. So I think we felt we wanted to get out and say this for a long time, but maybe the interest wasn't there, maybe the platform wasn't there, because it was kind of a bit easier to just go, well, I'm all right doing what I do in my association that I'm in or within my qualification, and I don't need anything else. This has shone a light on the fact that we aren't recognised in the way that we'd like to be recognised. Our value has been questioned. Our place in the industry has been questioned, and it's given us the opportunity to explore that, and for people to want to hear, the stuff that we've got to say, because that they feel like maybe they need some help in finding their place.
No, that's been fascinating, certainly. And I think what's interesting, because the Massage Collective and now the Massage Matters podcast run by you, Matt and Anna Maria, the reason why I don't like to you can talk to any of the three of you about any of the topics. But admittedly, for me, I've delineated it this way in the early stages, and why I wanted to talk to you about some of the specifics is because Matt, admittedly, you know, if I wanted to zoom in on some of the nitty gritty of the evidence, as well as we had him on the show a couple of weeks ago for those that haven't seen it, and we really got stuck into what it means to, in a philosophical sense, and what that means in terms of its position. And whilst I know full well that you can riff on similar things, similarly, it just felt like that's something that's admittedly is so his wheelhouse. Anna Maria, huge inspiration to me in the way in which she sort of sees that big picture policy, but also the business aspects of it, as well as being, of course, close to that stuff and a huge passion for what it means sociologically. And definitely we're going to talk about with her on this show and elsewhere about those sorts of things. I consider you, rightly or wrongly, to be someone that is just so in touch, your fingers so close to the pulse on the grassroots. And I think that sometimes speaks to the fact that you're relatively new to it, but also seem to have had your mind open to the position of you and people like you in the industry in such a way. So I definitely want to really focus on that here. I wanted to ask, as well as that framing, does that feel a sort of appropriate place that you see yourself in this conversation? Not just with me now, I mean the broader conversation. And if so, how relevant is the timing as well as your position with your colleagues?
Yeah, I think you're spot on, and that's why I hope that's why people enjoy listening to Anna, Matt, and I, and that's why we work as a trio, because we've all got our different strengths, and like you say, Matt is just mind-blowingly intelligent. I'm exhausted from every conversation I ever have with Matt. And Anna has her wealth of experience in teaching, and Anna's great strength for me is that she's been through all this process of change, and she's had to adapt the way she not only practices herself, but the way she conveys that to her students. I've come in as a complete outsider to the industry. I had no background in this whatsoever. And yeah, it just, a lot of stuff that went on didn't really make sense to me. I was lucky enough to be taught by Anna. So from a very early stage, it was an evidence-based approach without being too heavily academic. But then I looked at the industry as a whole, and I was like, there's this whole section that's being forgotten and that's being dismissed and that's not being spoken to, and is being told that what they're doing is wrong, but is not being given any clear pathway to improve. Because and the thing that struck me, first of all, and I've said this before, I was lucky in the groups that I fell in with. You know, I discovered yourself, I discovered Matt Phillips, Mike James, and so I felt like the stuff that I was listening to took me down the right path. However, what I very quickly sort of saw is that if I wanted any quality evidence-based CPD, it had to be physio-led, and I wasn't a physio, and I don't have a degree. I don't have an academic background. So a lot of the time, that to me feels like a very daunting situation to be in. So what you have two choices then, don't you? You go, well, I'm not going to engage in any of that because it's too scary. Or I'll go along and I'll sit at the back and hope nobody talks to me and nobody asks me a question because I don't belong here. So with you know, the MSK industry as a whole is saying that massage needs to improve, that we need to change our narrative, that we need to be more evidence-based, but we're not helping anybody get there.
Now, I wanted to, that it concerns me in a number of ways, because I recognize all that you're saying, but I also don't want to divorce myself from some responsibility for that pulling the ladder up that could well have occurred. And I'm, you know, typical narcissism for me to sort of make it about me for a second, but do you think me and team at times have contributed to some of those negative forces that have sort of pulled that ladder up, or has it always been at least accessible enough?
I think perhaps some of that depends on the therapist that's accessing it. I was a newbie, and I always found I didn't feel that you were pulling the ladder up from me. Now, whether that's just because I'm a bit thick-skinned and broad-shouldered and I could accept some of the criticism that I was hearing, and occasionally just some of the out-of-hand dismissing a whole area of the industry, maybe that didn't bother me as much as it does do some other people. I have heard, and I'm not going to shoot anybody down because I think what everybody does is great. It talks to different people, but I have had some therapists say, oh, I just won't listen to that because it's not relevant to me, or they don't like manual therapy, or and that's where I feel then they're missing out, because it's like, well, can you accept that criticism? Can you accept their point of view and just take from it what will help you? So I've not really answered your question there. I think maybe yes, sometimes you have, but it's not been deliberate, and it's not been in a Sodom, let's not worry about way. It's been in a, this is our area of expertise and this is what we're going to talk about. And actually, why would you talk about massage? You're doing a physio podcast, you know. But rather than criticize yourselves or anybody else that's been aiming at that market, what worries me more is that there was nothing filling the gap in between. So you could go on a course to learn how to release someone's fascia, or you can listen to some physio-led stuff. So there's nothing bridging that gap, and it shouldn't be purely down to physios or osteos to be delivering quality CPD to manual and massage therapists. There should be some good enough educators in manual therapy that we can do it within our own field. And yes, draw on the stuff that you guys do, and you know, especially for us as soft tissue therapists, we don't just do manual therapy. We do a lot of exercise rehab, lifestyle stuff, you know, the kind of stuff that you guys do, although in a slightly different scope of practice. So yes, from that point of view, we should be listening to your stuff, and we should be understanding it and accessing it. But there should also be that middle ground, and there should be stuff coming from massage and manual therapists that is good quality and is evidence-based.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased to hear it. And as I say, I wasn't meaning to suddenly make it all sort of us-centric in a sense, not even me, just generally thinking about what our interaction with it has. I think that there's, and I'm glad that you feel it'd be more of a mischaracterization or misunderstanding of a position that would sometimes isolate people than it being that we've ever been utterly dismissive. Because it's kind of and this is one of the things that's really, you guys have really changed me on, is that it's been the first time I've heard people from in that side of the industry that have then spoken and saying, we agree with you wholeheartedly, or at least want to engage with the concern you have over the inference of mechanism of effect of our interventions, but we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, which has kind of always been at the heart of it. As someone that has no particular beef, and especially when I think it's a category error when people are particularly against manual therapy. When you get into the weeds on it, we always seem to reveal the fact that it's like, well, if you define manual therapy by its worst characteristics, then I think that most sensible evidence-informed massage therapists are against that style of manual therapy.
Absolutely.
It's the inference of what you're suggesting to patients. So when we sort of spell that out, I think it sort of seems to be an appropriate thing. I wonder what your thoughts are on this. I think that as physios, we continue to be utterly paranoid at the perception of physio from society at large to be glorified masseuses in such a way that, and that language is often used, and in needing to carve an identity that is something that's beyond basic technician, especially because that comes with a suggestion of fixing people, that over the years, by trying to change that perception, we've then needed to be so aggressive that we've kind of ended up being far more dismissive than we ever needed to or want to be, when we know that that's an integrated tool, that most of us aren't truly against it, but it's because it's been seen as so central to our identity. That's the thing that I think has got swept up in it. And I've never, for a time until relatively recently, I think I've not realized who in the wider MSK game gets isolated by that rhetoric. And I think that's one of the things I've really come to learn from you guys. Can you see that social context, or am I retrofitting it over, maybe after the fact?
I think it's very true. And I think almost it's why massage has gone the wrong way. It's almost, you guys have gone, right, we need to not justify our position, but we need to make sure our value is seen, and that value is to be very evidence-based and to not be seen as glorified massage therapists. Massage therapy has almost gone the other way and say we have to prove the medical or the medical value of this, so we're going to try and come up with a structural argument. Right. And that's what's given us this narrative that's that's not plausible and doesn't stand up to evidence, because we've had to find a way of well, we're not physios, so we're not just going to exercise people, or we're not going to go down the way that evidence-based physio has. We want to use these manual techniques because we see that they have a value, and our way of justifying them has been a structural argument which doesn't stand up. So I think yeah, you've got a really good point there, and what it's actually done is just driven the two professions apart, rather than go, well, okay, if physio wants to concentrate on this side of things, on this way of treating people, then actually, to me, soft tissue therapists, sports therapists, massage therapists, whatever title you're working under, you have more of a value, because we're saying that's where you go to get that particular type of treatment, because you're unlikely to encounter that in a physio setting, or to a lesser extent.
And it feels increasingly that way, and we're seeing that commentary come through, especially under the NHS being under strain and people accessing independent services through insurance or otherwise. They're starting to feel like that's the only place in which they can have a conversation about a more integrated and balanced strategy beyond rehab, or I won't even call it rehab, but yeah, the sheet of exercises cliche that we all want to pretend is not pervasive certainly in the physio game. Now, the specificity I see as being a big challenge, and something that I know you've spoken well on, and I can't recall whether this is me watching some of your broadcasts or whether it's a personal or a private chats that we've had, but that's something that seems to intimidate a lot of massage therapists, and generally speaking, I'd say across the MSK industry, is the fact that a lot of the challenges that come from us as commentators talking about evidence-informed rehab-centric practice is that the specificity of styles and types and ways in which you might influence tissue, and the sort of inference of what tape can do, what hands can do, what needles can do, etc., and the complexity that's been created as a means of inferring specificity, in part to be able to sell delineated courses as part of champion influencers, but generally speaking, that has been something that, when we talk sensibly about what it means to be involved in massage therapy, the sensible sort of, I argue that the right answer to it comes from you guys that are challenging that specificity, or that the expertise isn't there. The expertise is in the person-centeredness. Yeah. How have you gone about that journey? Because I don't feel like I'm the right person to be able to speak that language, because I've been in that situation. So did that threaten you, and how did you transition out of that?
Even for me, who's someone who's trained fairly recently, and I've not invested, I invested a lot of money in my initial course. I've not invested thousands and thousands on CPD or trademarked courses or anything like that. Even me was like, well, why did I learn all these techniques then? What was the point in that? So it is a difficult journey. And it's, the frustrating thing is that specificity of modality has, I believe, led to this very structural outlook. I've had to justify teaching you. If I want to teach a course purely based on one specific modality, I have to give you a justification as to why that works over every other hands-on modality. And that has to, there's no other way that can be than a structural explanation. It releases this particular muscle. It whatever the explanation is for it. So, and that's something, and that's the big change I'd like to see in the industry, is that we stop doing that, because of course it leads to structuralism. And how can we ever put the patient or the client at the center of what we do if we're going to choose a particular modality because it's what we've learned and we think it does this structurally? Now, if you are a therapist who has done a lot of your education around modalities, or even, and this is the other thing that happens in the massage industry or the manual therapy industry, your identity is tied up with your modality. So you are a myofascial release therapist, or your identity is so fixed with that modality. God, of course that's frightening. Of course it's intimidating. Of course you sit there and go, well, what the hell am I going to do then? And that's, I want to see those courses stop being sold like that, because I think they're not worthwhile. Does that mean the modalities aren't worthwhile? No, it doesn't. Those modalities are worthwhile. But as a hands-on therapist, you need to have a variety of modalities, not to affect tissues in different ways, but because different modalities will suit different individuals. So a type of hands-on treatment that helps one person will feel probably unpleasant to another, and you need to, so it's not as much, I'm not just saying we need to chuck them all out and as long as you can give somebody a nice rub, we'll be fine. You need a variety of modalities. You need lots of different strategies of using your hands and treating different symptoms and things like that. But you don't need to hang your hat on them, and you need to understand that all you're doing is finding something that helps that client rather than treats a particular pathology in a very specific way because that's the modality you've been taught to apply when a tendon is sore.
And I think that's what's interesting to me, is that you've got that patient preference leading to assisting the modality choice, if we call it that, in such a way that sometimes there's been arguments that is just raw pandering. That's the sort of and what you guys are doing is articulating a way in which it's truly patient-centered without necessarily just being a nodding dog and going along with whatever is being asked of you, especially if their patient is carrying with it some assumptions as to why they need that particular thing.
So I think it's only pandering if a client is coming to you saying, I need you to do this, because and they've got that false belief around it. Or it's pandering if you say, I am going to do this, and then you give them a false belief as to why it's going to work. It's not pandering to work with your client to find out what is acceptable for them, what is comfortable for them, what helps them in terms of their pain level, in terms of their ability to move, in terms of their ability to engage in other activities. That's not pandering, that's being client-centered.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what fascinates me, and I want to get to a couple of bits of policy sort of questions as well towards the end of this, but I do want to come to some questions that have come in. We've got a chunk of a live audience, so I want to ask you a direct question to those that are watching live as to what do you feel a position is currently of massage within the MSK industry? That's what I want to ask you, is where do you feel it is? Now, Becky, don't you answer that just yet. I'm asking the audience to check, put into the comments wherever it might be, and it'll come to us. I want to know where you feel it fits. One of the things that we've got a cluster of questions here from David Poulter, who's come through on Periscope on Twitter. He said, I want you just quick fire if you wish, is massage manual therapy? Is manual therapy part of massage? What is soft tissue therapist? I think there's some rhetorical questions there, but sod it, let's try and answer them. What's your take?
It's all different names for very similar things, isn't it? What is a soft tissue therapist? Someone who addresses or pain that is of soft tissue origin, maybe. That would be a very crude, I'd say it's not just that. Is massage manual therapy? Is manual therapy part of, I think those two words are interchangeable, to be honest, because you're laying hands on someone. Maybe we just need to no, it all sounds a bit dodgy when you start saying, what's your profession? Oh, I put my hands on people. But essentially that's
hands on people for money. Yeah, they get lumped into far too many things, wouldn't you, by that? But
in a massage parlour, according to Boris Johnson, but we won't get into that.
Massage parlour and things like that. Yeah, that did come up.
I think all those and again, this comes down to the fact we're an unregulated industry. So if you want to sell a qualification or if you want to sell a CPD, you have to come up for a name for it, and that name becomes that therapist's identity. Honestly, and when a client, so if I think about it, when a client asks me, what's the difference between you and a sports therapist? The difference between you and a massage therapist? Very little is the answer. As long as, and this, this speaks to what you're doing with MSKR as well, isn't it? The difference is the therapist. The difference is not the name of the therapy that they're providing. It's, are they a good client-centered, evidence-based practitioner?
Absolutely. I think that what's fascinating for me is that we were talking about this as MSKR when really, having studied it carefully, we were kind of frustrated about the fact that there's a bit of it's smoke and mirrors regulation anyway. across what would be considered the allied health professions that are then under a tighter seen as being a more legitimate regulation, of which on a safety level there's some credibility to it in terms of the likelihood of being able to detect a physiotherapist on the HCP register who's then committing some sort of let's say some sort of taking advantage of their circumstance in which they're then committing some sort of sexual act on a patient, right? It's just in a situation where those safety grounds, there's an argument that that's actually where it acts well and swiftly, etc., in the claims sense, where there's a professionalization that has occurred on that safety level. But in terms of quality standards, I won't go into it too much. If people want to, they can even download an audio book for free of the Manifesto for Reform, which gets stuck into this on a governance level as to why that regulation is paper rather than legitimate. But it's just something that I've come to realize, and why we speak the language of MSK therapist really as something that feels quite interesting to my identity, is because at the moment we're looking at a circumstance that, because of the legacy, and we understand why on a legal front, why in the moment when someone needs to say who can stay open, who can stay shut, what is the legitimate level of governance that feels like it's safe for the public. In that moment, you can understand some of the decision making. But when people like us have been making this argument for a while and saying there isn't a there in this regulatory framework, it's foolish and we're not speaking sensibly about it, I end up in a situation where some of the therapists that I would send friends and family members, love friends and family members to see their MSK problems and feel confident in doing it, are currently not allowed to practice. When Cowboy Joe blogs up the road who's full of shit but happens to have the right certificate on the wall, who's done the degree that's technically on a register, which of course is more paper again rather than legitimacy, they're able to stay open and, for me, sell sickness. That's what has somewhat radicalized me in terms of timing for wanting to work closely with you guys to say, and even put to bed some of the mistakes I might have made historically, me and team, where we've sometimes come across and worded this wrong, is that for me is something that we need to lose any sort of identity-based tribalism around the industry and start thinking about what quality therapists look like, because it's really mattering at the moment, because it literally is who's allowed to A, stay open legally, B, be insured to then see people and feel safe and under that insurance, and 3, the customer behavior as to, even when it's legal and insured, the customer behavior as to trust, who feels safe, etc., is being questioned. And so it just feels like that's why a time is now is for this conversation on a policy level.
Yeah, and you're right, and it's highlighted all of that. What it's also highlighted to me as well is, and I've said it before, but if we want to be included in that, and we're all up in arms that the government, the way we were referred to initially, they did then rephrase it. Unfortunately, it seems to have gone backwards a little bit on this this legislation, but we're the only ones that can change that. And actually, this is an opportunity for us to show how professional we can be. I'm not going to see you in the next 4 weeks to give you a nice, relaxing, therapeutic massage, because that would be wholly inappropriate. It's not essential. It's not safe with what's going on in the world at the moment. But there are situations where I might have some value in helping somebody avoid using NHS services or continue to be able to live a life that's meaningful to them. So we actually have a really good opportunity to kind of go, right, okay, I'm going to show you just how professional I can be. And you think the only people that can be safe are physios, because I can be safe. I can put in appropriate safety measures. I can show clinical reasoning in why I'm going to see somebody and why I'm not. I'm going to show restraint in just seeing anybody who phones me for an appointment. So it's given us a great opportunity to go, I can be on that same level of professionalism. And again, that doesn't come down to your qualification. That comes down to you behaving like a professional and like a responsible therapist.
That professionalisation agenda is something we're going to talk more about, and certainly that's one for your and my colleague Anna Maria to jump on the show in future to really get stuck into when we get some of the scaffolding around that. But one of the things that's a place, and I know that we're out of time, so we do need to wrap up, but one of the things that I think is interesting for me is you guys are towing a completely sensible line right now, by the way, with regards to what is COVID safe, what is or isn't appropriate. However, I'm probably someone that would understand on a pragmatic level. I can think of circumstances that would challenge that a little, in that when you think about what is considered urgent, and you think about what a patient considers as urgent and what might keep people out of hospital, when you think about the integrated biopsychosocial features that contribute to people's well-being, you think about the mental health sequelae that we're all recognizing in the statistics as well as the anecdotes that we're encountering, is that even something like an hour with a therapist that you trust, giving a completely sterile and safe intervention that is a relaxing massage that might then keep someone from various different other downstream effects, I would argue even something like that is an incredibly potent intervention. And when you think about the fact that massage therapy, for whatever political reason, is something that, unlike arts therapists, drama therapists, music therapists, that happen to be small professions within what is considered an NHS England's AHP bubble for various reasons, is something that your man and your massage therapy colleagues that are working in oncology, it's just that you think about the incredible interventions that they're delivering that for arbitrary reasons are falling outside of the net, is incredibly distressing for me, and why I've become, some have argued, radicalized in this direction to say that we've got to scratch away. When you scratch away at these things, you realize there isn't as much substance there as people realize. And so I want to just encourage everyone to pay more attention to you guys. I would say that being involved in what you're doing with Massage Matters, but pay attention and follow the Massage Collective. Start to think more carefully about these things, because you'll be surprised at what you've missed, because you've probably been a bit dismissive sometimes if you're on the MSK front, and you might not have been as thoughtful about what you're doing in the massage front. And you guys are really bridging that gap, lovely.
Yeah, and you say that about my position is I don't think we should be giving therapeutic massage just now, but and it is 2 minutes past 1, but I think even more so now, we've had touch taken away from us as a society, and that's a discussion for another day, that actually if the only legitimate legal way somebody who's in pain or is struggling with mental health problems can have therapeutic touch from somebody who cares for them and is willing to listen to them and help them, then that has massive value at the moment,
like
more
I say,
so than ever.
On safety and governance grounds, I think you've got a completely correct position that is smart and safe for you. But I suppose that's the thing, I'm using a somewhat position of professional privilege because of the arbitrary hierarchy to say, actually, I'd go a bit further, but I understand why you guys aren't, because I think we need to be more thoughtful about the specifics of the intervention and what it means to be COVID safe now compared to what we thought 9 months ago when we didn't understand this virus as much, for example. So anyway, we are out of time and overtime as ever. I'm creeping over, aren't I? I always say I'll try and keep to time, and I've been told I'm always 5 minutes over, but thanks as ever for your time, mate. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate all the work you're doing, and it certainly won't be the last time. I hope this hasn't been too daunting.
A little bit daunting, but I'm all right.
She's cooked. All right,
I'm going to the beach now.
Tune into Massage Matters, tune into the Massage Collective, and again, we'll see you tomorrow. And tomorrow is Finance Friday. Oh, one thing I wanted to point out as well, there's a great chat going on, 8:30 on the support group, the physiotherapist support group on Facebook, Gemma Oliver's group. They're talking about health code. So if you're in private practice and you get frustrated by the private medical insurers and are wanting to disrupt that industry, then Leanne and Martin are doing a live stream at 8:30 on there. So please do tune into that, and we're going to get them involved in Tuning It Over in the coming weeks as well, to get stuck into the private medical insurers that we all love, of course. So anyway, do go and check them out. And thanks again, everyone, for your time. Tune in tomorrow for me chatting to Obi Hassan. If you've got any questions in private practice about financial gubbins, then definitely submit those. What are you struggling with at the moment? What would you like a bit of guidance on? Where should the priorities be with a financial director? So that should be fascinating. So anyway, that's enough from us. Take care.
Cheers.